On February the 17th, 2021, a vast majority of newspapers worldwide reported the same news. Raffaele Cutolo had passed away. Raffaele Cutolo, a figure shrouded in mystery, a 79-year-old convict who, despite being imprisoned and out of the spotlight for more than 55 years, managed to influence popular culture to such an extent that he became the inspiration and lead character of books, films, and even song lyrics. Italy's most notorious camorra boss, Raffaele Cutolo, has played a fundamental role in the history of crime in our country and beyond. The name of this ambiguous and charismatic character, eloquent and cruel, has been linked several times to controversial events shrouded in mystery, such as the Cirillo case involving a local politician who was kidnapped, and the kidnapping of Aldo Moro, an Italian prime minister who was kidnapped and killed by extreme left-wing terrorists. Several of his secrets have come to light. Others will remain forever veiled in darkness. However, one thing is certain: the death of Raffaele Cutolo has brought down the curtain on a life that turned Italian society upside down, and on a figure that managed to renew the idea of organised crime, wrapping it in an aura of myth and making it, unfortunately, terribly fascinating in the eyes of many for the years to come. Who was Raffaele Cutolo? The founder and boss of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata, the NCO, has practically spent his entire life in prison and on the run. But this didn't prevent him from creating a precise and effective criminal machine that is the Camorra we know today. That large family feared and respected that protects and helps its members, and that in one way or another presents itself as an alternative model to the state. Roberto Saviano, a writer who has spent a lot of time researching the Camorra, intervening in one of the most popular TV programs on the occasion of the death of the boss, he defined Raffaele Cutolo as the one who was able to convert simple criminal practice into a political ideology. But where did this character come from? How did Raffaele Cutolo manage to become o professore, which means obviously the professor in Italian? How could a simple, uneducated man gather around himself numerous followers ready to give their lives for him, and to make a mark in society and popular culture of the 70s and 80s in such a strong way, becoming the key negative symbol? Raffaele Cutolo is originally from Ottaviano, a town in the province of Naples. Cutolo was born at the foot of the volcano Vesuvius, not far from the sumptuous Medici castle, the ancient symbol of the de' Medici family prestige. In the 1980s, this same castle was bought by Raffaele Cutolo for a little less than 300 million lira. It was an important gesture, which indicated the increasing power obtained by Raffaele Cutolo. The future head of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata had humble origins. His father was a farmer and his mother a laundress. He didn't dedicate himself to an academic career, despite his nickname being o professore. He didn't even have a middle school diploma. Cutolo preferred to take a different path, and at just 22 years old, he committed his first murder. The victim was Mario Visito, who had expressed an exaggerated appreciation for Rosetta Cutolo, yes, Raffaele's sister. 3 years later, Cutolo was imprisoned for the crime, and from that moment on, he began his long journey between prison and freedom. But it was the prison that allowed the rise of this future boss. Here, in fact, Cutolo began to gather supporters and to become protector of other prisoners. But his project began to make its way in his mind and to take shape in reality only in the 1970s, when he returned again to prison. So, what about the birth of the new organised Camorra? At the time, the Camorra was nothing more than a group of families with criminal activities that acted independently. Each had its own territory and full power over it. The relationships between the various families could change, obviously, from time to time, depending on the prevailing economic interests at stake. This loose and uneven structure allowed other mafia, such as the Sicilian Cosa Nostra, to maintain some control over important areas of Campania, reducing the region's criminal groups to just mere underlings. So Raffaele Cutolo, at that time the boss of Ottaviano family, had understood that it was necessary to create a pyramid structure that would allow the camorra to defend itself from the interference of criminal groups coming in from outside the region. Now, it wasn't easy to gather all these families and all the same interests under the same flag. And for this reason, the boss decided to take his cue from the ritualistic forms, the gestures, the hierarchy and symbols of the Neapolitan proto-camorra of the 19th century. His goal was to create an organisation with a precise ideological basis, a point of reference for all those criminals, the young drifters, the poor and ambitious who wanted something different from their prevailing miserable existence. Something that only the NCO could offer them. In other words, the plan of Raffaele Cutolo was to transform a disorganised bunch of criminal families into the Cosa Nostra of Naples. Soon, this new criminal association commenced to resemble other similar big mafias in the country. Nuovo Camorra Organizzata had an establishment date itself of October the 24th, 1970. It offered a social identity and prestige that many coveted. Through a series of ceremonies which made it even more exclusive and authoritative, one could become part of a powerful group. Roberto Saviano revealed a curious but fitting anecdote which makes us understand how much Cutolo gave importance to symbology and investitures. Roberto Saviano mentioned that the Nuovo Camorra Organizzata boss recorded a tape in prison on which, quote, he laid out the baptismal formula, the oath that all future affiliates had to pronounce in order to become part of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata. Saviano adds that, in this way, Cutolo provided his gang of extortionists, killers and drug traffickers with a founding myth that made them feel like noble knights of great lineage. For the first time ever, they were no longer mere criminals, but privileged and powerful individuals who didn't have to hide and could boast of being part of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata, and who were treated like royalty both inside and outside of prison. But the boss wanted to do more. Cutolo wanted to make this new winning identity of the Camorra a countrywide phenomenon, an organisation known as much as possible and in every corner of the country. And if he wanted to do it quickly, he could only rely on the mass media. Raffaele Cutolo had become part of the collective imagination, thanks to his desire to make the Nuova Camorra Organizzata known through the media, and his astuteness in creating a charismatic and intellectual character, capable of sweeping under the carpet the cruelty of the ideology that he professed. The boss of the NCO, during his interviews with the main Italian broadcaster Rai, took advantage of the journalist's questions to compare Nuova Camorra Organizzata to political parties and business enterprises. Cutolo justified himself, saying that all these realities were equally dirty, and therefore it wasn't right to condemn only the Camorrists, who were people who came from nothing and built their own power, often putting their own lives at stake. The boss was nicknamed O Professore for a reason. He had an innate ability to argue with reason, and his logic was impeccable, and he spoke directly to that slice of poor, marginalized and young people that were looking for a redemption that apparently the state couldn't offer. The Camorra was effective, its courts fast and efficient, and for this reason it was able to gather so much consensus. And I guess you guys have already watched the videos on how Cosa Nostra and Ndrangheta came to light and the reasons behind it. Well, the pattern is always the same, providing hope to hopeless, marginalised people, and providing better services that the government wasn't in a position to care for. However, this time the difference was that the Nuova Camorra Organizzata was founded during the last century by a bright man who understood the situation and most likely studied the origins of other Italian organised crime syndicates. Moreover, Cutolo had done his accounts well, adopting an effective language and building up an excellent publicity machine for his criminal association. And starting from the same name, the acronym NCO in fact wasn't chosen at random, but with the intention of bringing to mind other famous political military organisations. The boss succeeded where no one had ever done before, and his figure influenced the art of literature, film and music. For example, a famous Italian songwriter, Fabrizio De André, composed a song sung in Neapolitan that would become later one of his masterpieces. The title was Don Raffaele, clearly referring to Raffaele Cutolo. The song deals with the inhumane situation of many prisons in the 1980s, and it's a witty and heartfelt complaint that, through the expedient of the story of a police officer, shows the dark side of a country subjected to crime. Cutolo understood the opportunity and he tried to exploit the situation in his favour, with the intent of making the NCO an even more popular crime syndicate. So he turned to the basic skills of marketing first of all, and he decided to write a letter to the singer-songwriter to compliment him, stating that he'd been very good at guessing the reality inside the prisons, even though he hadn't obviously ever been there. Although Fabrizio De André replied with courtesy and thanked Cutolo for taking the time to write to him, the songwriter preferred not to continue the correspondence with Raffaele Cutolo. However, the song Don Raffaele was not the only popular media to make Cutolo more notorious. Certainly, the bestseller by Joe Morazzo, Il Camorrista, which became a successful movie directed and scripted by Giuseppe Tornatore, allowed the general public to get to know Raffaele Cutolo even further. This book tells, in a fictional way, the life of the boss of the NCO, and over the years became a real cult movie, allowing the boss, now in prison, to remain alive in the memories of the Italian people. The Italian government tried very hard to prevent the distribution of the movie and to restrict the content of the same work. The reason was the ongoing negotiation between the state and the Camorra boss to facilitate the release of Ciro Cirillo, a politician kidnapped by a far-left organisation in the 1980s. In other words, after failing to conduct meaningful negotiations with the kidnappers, the Italian government requested Cutolo to intervene and intercede to achieve the release of Cirillo in exchange for prison benefits and money. And this was the level of power and respect that Cutolo had over his territory. Even terrorists would have to engage with him if he asked them to. Despite Cutolo himself being very proud of this event to strengthen even more his own image in the criminal world, he decided to start a legal action that forced the withdrawal of the film for 2 months. The boss, in fact, had shown a vehement dissatisfaction with the death of his right-hand man and close friend. And according to the story told in the book and in the movie, Morazzo indicated that Cutolo was the mastermind behind the murder of Cutolo's right-hand man and close friend. Cutolo himself had always denied these circumstances. Controversy and threats of lawsuits forced the production to include an introduction stating that the facts shown were a fantastic elaboration of the events that had occurred. As we mentioned at the beginning, Raffaele Cutolo died in February 2021, following an aggravation of his condition that led him to shuttle between hospital and prison. In June 2020, his release from prison and home detention had been requested in order to give him the possibility to be taken care of properly. However, the Supervisory Court of Bologna decided that his condition was compatible with detention. The words of the judges perfectly clarified the importance that Cutolo has had until now. They said, it can be considered that the presence of Raffaele Cutolo could strengthen the criminal groups that still refer to the Nuovo Camorra Organizzata, groups with respect to which Cutolo has fully maintained the charisma. In spite of his age and his long detention, Cutolo still represents a symbol for all those criminal groups. So that's it, the fascinating story of this charismatic leader, a legend that will no doubt live on. But do stay tuned as we have loads more videos coming on this subject shortly, which means please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss them. Also, as you'll see, we do read your comments below and of course take into account any suggestions that you do make, so please keep them coming. And until next time, thanks for watching and ciao.